Hello, and welcome to another episode of Myths and Stories, a Destiny 2 lore podcast. Today, we are back from Thanksgiving. Yay!
Yay.
And, and we are continuing our history of the Eliksni. We're very much in like the current history is what I would like to think of it as, because we ended last time with the prison break from the Prison of Elders, which was essentially the opening to Forsaken, the Forsaken expansion, with Varix finally kind of coming to terms with the idea that he's the one to kind of reignite the Eliksni fire, to kind of get back to the way things should be, or the way that he thinks that things should be, or the way that things should have been, like they were back on Reese. And so he rises up as saying, he sends his message out: I am Kel of House Judgment. This is it. This is the official Eliksni. Go call to arms, if you want to think of it that way. So yeah, that's where we ended last time. And so Myth, where are we jumping into? Are we jumping right into? I mean, I don't feel like we need to do the entire Forsaken story.
No, I don't think so. A big portion of the Forsaken story was covered in our Awoken series, because
This
it
is true.
was primarily dealing with Aldrin and Fickrol, and kind of our Guardian reacting to what they did and what they were trying to do. And that was all very much Awoken. It wasn't really anything Eliksni tying. So not going to cover the story of Forsaken again here. If you want it, it's in that Eliksni series, or excuse me, in that Awoken series. We are going to focus more on what happened a little bit after the end of the Forsaken campaign, which was the Black Armory season.
Such a good season.
It really was. It really was.
The Black Armory season had a lot of that mystery to it. Like it had a lot of that, like what is this thing? What does this mean? What does this do? Like, what the heck is that over there? Why can I see symbols through gun scopes? Like, what is all this stuff mean? Like, Black Armory was a fantastic season. Just out all together. Love Black Armory. Okay. Go ahead, Myth. Sorry, didn't mean to jump up here and be like, Black Armory, let's go. But that's kind of how I felt.
No, it was a good one. And it actually had a lot more Eliksni tie-in than what I think a lot of people remember or realize if they weren't there to play it when it was happening. So we're going to discuss that, and then we're going to talk about a character that everyone should be very familiar with at this point, and that is Eramis.
Who?
But so starting off with Black Armory. This comes off.
Myth might shoot me for that. Who?
Just, if you ignore it, it didn't happen.
Exactly.
So starting off with Black Armory, this is off the cusp of the end of Forsaken. And I guess spoilers, at the end of Forsaken, Aldrin dies. And not only is this a big important moment for our Guardian, for the Awoken people, for Petra and the Dreaming City, it's also a really big moment for the Eliksni, because Aldrin had been acting until immediately before Forsaken, had been acting as kind of the Kel of the House of Dusk. And although he, killed a decent amount of the House of Dusk, those that were previously part of the House of Kings, to turn them into scorn, he's now, like, Dusk truly has no leader now. So this ragtag group of Eliksni houses that had finally come together because they had, out of sheer survival, and had started to build a true united relationship. Like, they were forgetting about their old rivalries, as we talked about, where there was a group that were captured by the Vex, and they were told, like, yeah, fight each other, and whoever wins will let go, and they refused to do so. So there were some family bonds forming there amongst House Dusk, but unfortunately, uh, with the docking and unknown fate of the former Kell of Kings at the hands of Aldrin, and then Aldrin, uh, you know, kind of wiping his hands of the rest of Dusk, they find themselves in a very precarious situation again. A lot of the Eliksni around across the system no longer have a house, or no longer have a leader for their house. A situation they are all too familiar with.
Because Dusk was very much like, it was supposed to be that, um what would you call it, like a uniting house, right? Like that
Yeah.
was, because if I remember correctly, Kings, their whole thing, the House of Kings, was to be like the uniter of all the houses,
Yeah.
which is kind of an odd thought, right? Like you have a house that's as itself is just a house that is now, that's its whole purpose is and devotion is to uniting all of the Eliksni people, which is kind of counterintuitive to having individual houses. But with Dusk came the new, like, that Dusk was supposed to be in the Kell of Kings eyes. House Dusk was supposed to be that new, like, unified house. Like all Eliksni should have fallen under House Dusk. But
Yes.
then when Uldren comes in and he's like, "Hey," or, well, obviously they bring him in beaten and bruised, and they're like, "Hey, we could use you." And in his mind, he's like, "I could use you too." Um, Obviously, that kind of, like, that whole thing just kind of went to shit real quick. Because do we know the actual, you said the unknown fate of the Kell of Kings? It did Was that like kind of the end of him? Like he gets docked and then that's it? Like is he just some random scorn now?
So that's the last that I have seen him come up. They don't explicitly say whether he gets turned into a scorn, or whether they just leave him to be, a humiliated dreg, essentially,
Oh,
or what
sure.
happens. But I know Varix, at the very least, we saw he received word of what had happened to the Kell of Kings, and he essentially at that point just kind of assumed he was dead. He was okay.
Yeah.
Clearly, you know, that Kel is no longer going to be someone that I can rely on to bring the Eliksni, into a better place.
Because like we said at kind of the end of the last episode, Varric saw him as like the last, like, recognizable Kell of the old ways.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
he's the only one that would see Varix as anything, as something other than just a traitor to Mara, or a traitor to House Wolves, servant to Mara or whatever. Like that's, to see for Varix, for the Kell of Kings to go away, whether it be to return him to just dock him down to a dreg, or kill him and return him as scorn, or whatever, just kill him outright. That's the end of an era, and that
yeah,
was the whole reason that Varix was like, okay, well, I've got to stand up, and if nobody else is going to do this, I've got to do this to at least keep my name relevant.
yeah. So, the Eliksni again are in a very bad spot, and are, Dusk is still holding together, and is still holding together even in game right now. But it's in the same way that House of Exile was before, where there really isn't a leader. It's kind of just little, the pockets of Dusk that happen to have already been working together are still working together to try and stay alive. And it would be very enticing for a leader to come forward in some fashion to provide some sense of stability. And we see a lot of the members of Dusk migrating to Spider for that. And we see some members of Dusk starting to migrate to a new group at this time, that is called the Kells Scourge. And it is a group that is uh, very much kind of a Eliksni anarchist group. And their whole point is to sow chaos amongst the system. Essentially, like has the mindset of if we're going down, we're taking everyone else with us, kind of thing.
Yeah, I love chaos. I love a good chaos. These might be my people.
Yeah. Well, they are led by a Eliksni that was not known really at the time, but we've actually learned more about recently. And this is an Eliksni by the name of Civics. Those that don't remember, Civics was the other kind of adopted brother of Mithrax that was
Oh
kicked off the
yeah.
ship with Spider, known as Rackus.
So then he survived then, because we were trying to figure out what the hell happened to him. Because I mean, when Spider comes back, he's just himself. Like Civics is nowhere to be seen or heard of or anything. But this is where he ends up. Holy cow!
Yep, this is where he ends up. He had been in the prison of elders before. He had been captured for we don't know what, but captured and imprisoned. And then when Varix did the big prison break, he let everybody out, including Civics, and Civics was able to escape, and he started kind of this criminal underground, which ends up being a much it's if Spider is the mafia, they're criminal, but there's a code, there's rules within their organization, there's still a hierarchy. And where Civics is still the leader of this group, it is a group of anarchists. It is a group of guerrilla fighters and I guess you could say terrorists. Even amongst the Eliksni, they don't necessarily get along with the other Eliksni groups, and in fact, the Kel's Scourge is considered a direct competitor to Spider's ventures. And that's actually how we start the season out in the Black Armory season, is Spider coming to us and calling in a favor, essentially, and saying like, hey, there's another group out there that is stealing my shipments and is messing up my business. I'm calling in a favor for you to go figure out who they are and what they want.
Yeah.
And so we go through, we track down evidence of this group called the Kel's Scourge. And the description we get of the Kel's Scourge actually comes to us from the quest description of the Scourge of the Armory quest chain, which is the one that Spider gives us. And it says, Civics' syndicate, the Kel's Scourge, is fearless and growing fast. The Fallen are distributing his tainted Black Armory gear everywhere. And then track the origin of the tainted gear by investigating Fallen in the EDZ. As the quest suggests, we track this information to the EDZ, and we find little hideouts, essentially little caches of this Black Armory tech. And our Guardian, when we discover this, is like, these are not weapons we have seen before. This is not technology that we have seen. Where did this come from? And we trace that shipment that we find back to its source. That source being the Gofanon Forge on Nessus, which is apparently where Civics ended up and happened upon this derelict Black Armory forge, and was able to get it up and running enough that he could use it to enhance Eliksni weaponry, and started essentially an arms market. He became an arms dealer.
So the enhancement stuff, is that basically like and I'm kind of like playing through the missions in my head, and the effects that happen at the time. Do you remember that like shimmer effect that you could get on those guns back then?
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember what they called that.
I can't remember it, because they even removed it. Like they removed that from game, and then they sunset all the weapons. So I want to say it was called Obsidian Resonance or something.
Yeah, resonance sticks in my head, but it's difficult because the resonance on the Black Armory is different than resonance in reference to
Right.
most recently with like Rulk and whatnot.
Right.
So I don't know if I'm just getting my terms confused or
That
what.
that could be it. That could just be cross connecting in my brain too. You know me in terms like if it even remotely sounds like something else, they are all the same thing, and that's what my brain does. So
Yep.
yeah, no, I remember these missions a little bit, and like the forges. I mean, we have a whole series on Ada One and the Black Armory. So definitely, if you want more information on those, go check those out. But these forges are powerful. Like they were at the time that they were abandoned, which was pre Golden Age, or I guess that they were abandoned during the collapse.
Yep.
They were as powerful as like Braytech. Like they were direct competitors to Braytech, to Rasputin, to Siva, to everything. That I mean, they even had a Braytech member working for them, or
Yeah.
an ex Braytech member working for them to help get this technology up and running. So these forges were very, very powerful, and for an Eliksni that is, I mean, chaos. Yeah, like this is the ultimate source of power in the soul system to him to have
Yeah.
just this derelict forge at his whim and will and yeah.
Yeah, for a group looking to make the biggest explosion they can, they found quite the powder keg with the Black
Right.
Armory forges. And so we discover this forge. We report back to Spider about what our findings are and who is kind of the head of this organization, because we do see Civics when we discover the forge, albeit very briefly. He runs from us. And Spider essentially writes off his once brother at this point and says, he's bad for business. That's all Spider needs to know at that point. He's bad for business. He has no interest in being an ally to me. It's implying that there was some history there about that probably led to their separation in the first place. Uh and tasks us with essentially gives us a membership card and says, go talk to this person about these forges. And that is our introduction to Ada 1 originally. Our introduction to Ada 1, who is the legacy of the Black Armory.
Yeah. I mean, she was, again, to kind of call back to our Black Armory stuff. She was built as a walking forge.
Yes. Yep. And knows all the secrets of, or is the only person still alive that knows any of the secrets of the Black Armory and how those things operate, and is very disturbed by the thought that there is an Eliksni group that is using them to create weapons to then distribute amongst the various cells of Eliksni across the solar system. And so she tasks us with putting a stop to things, like, and not just putting a stop to things, but getting the forges operating again under her control, so that she now has the ability to dictate how they're used and who they're used for,
And to make guns like Jotun.
and to make guns like Jotun.
Because that's what we need is more Jotuns.
More Jotuns, more toasters.
More toasters.
So the player guardian does just that. We track Civics. We gain control over the Gofan Forge, and this forces Civics to flee as we start gaining more and more forges, starting with the Nessus one, or excuse me, starting with the EDZ one, and then going to Nessus, and then going to, I think the other one was on Io. I forget exactly where all of them
That
were.
seems familiar. For some reason, I'm remembering 2 on Nessus.
Maybe there were 2 on Nessus.
There were 2 on Nessus. There was because there was 2 in the EDZ and 2 on Nessus. The other one in Nessus was it had the harpy, and you had to jump between the Izanagi.
Yep.
Izanagi was that one. or not Izanagi, Izanami.
Izanami, yeah, but Izanagi's burden came from it. Yeah.
But so there's Izanami and Gofanon on Nessus, and then I can't remember the name of the first forge.
The Volndir Forge.
That's what it was. That's what it
Yep.
was.
So we had the Volndir Forge, the Izanami Forge, the Gofanon Forge, and the other one that we'll talk about here shortly.
Yeah, I'm super excited about the other one.
So regardless, our player guardian tracks down where these forges are with the help of Ada and removes them from the playing field for Civics. We take control of them and prevent him from, creating further weaponry with them.
But as we're going through this, we never come across Civics himself again, right? Or at least not while we're clearing out these different forges.
No, it's always in passing. It's like the story mission when you get there has him there briefly and then he runs the fuck away.
Of course he does.
We're scary.
I mean, we're what, the second most powerful thing in the universe?
Right. Like maybe don't have a shootout with that one.
Yeah.
So we keep driving him away and driving him into a corner, but he's been gathering information this whole time. He's starting to learn about the technology of the forges. He's started to uncover some of the where these forges connected to or where they came from. And so what we end up doing is as we're chasing him, we drive Civics to have to make a choice of like either give up on this altogether or double down and go for the big one. And so he and the rest of the Kel's Scourge flee their various hideouts across the solar system and proceed to infiltrate the Batsa district in the last city. Now, the Batsa district was still abandoned and in ruins at this time because it had not been rebuilt after the Red War. And they fled to the Batsa district specifically because Civics believed that the Black Armory vault called Ibisu existed there. And lo and behold, he was right. He and the Kel's Scourge unearthed this vault and uncovered new, essentially like military mech technology that had been developed or was in development by the Black Armory within this vault. And this is the technology that he used to graft the Kel's Scourge servitor into a war machine. Now, we learn that he's in the city. Even if it's an abandoned and derelict district of the city, he's in the city. The Vanguard are not going to be okay with that.
No, you're not just going to have a VIP, highly wanted guy just walking around the last city like it's nothing. Like, that's not going to happen.
So the Vanguard send in a raid team to deal with this most recent incursion of, at the time, Eliksni and Guardians are not really on speaking terms. So this incursion of hostile fallen in the Batsa district. And so a raid team lands, and this is the raid that players know as Scourge of the Past.
God, such a good one.
Really was a fun one.
I truly enjoyed some of the mechanics in that, where it was like, hey, you've got to match up these symbols. There was like the first encounter, there was a little 3D map of the city that you could see where the other players were on the map, and you had to direct them around to go pick stuff up, to go dunk them in other spots. And then when you get to the final encounter, it's the same way. Like, there's this map of the arena, and you're like directing people around it. Such a fun one. Was that the first one? Was that the first one we flawlessed?
If not the first, it was pretty high up there.
I think that was the first raid that our team flawlessed.
I think it was definitely, if it wasn't, it was like I said, it was first or second. But
one of our fire team members had a very fun experience with sparrows in there, and he will never ever live it down.
Nope. For anyone not aware, sparrows blow up when they're shot by enemies, and blowing up on a sparrow, not great for a flawless run.
Not good for flawless at all.
And this was outside of the sparrow race section of that raid for anyone that's familiar. So yeah, but so we progressed through this raid, trying to get to Civics before he can use whatever's potentially in this vault. And before, like, upon news that we arrived, Civics pieced out. Like, he didn't even wait to see us.
He's really that
this
concerned.
time.
He's really that concerned with faceness.
He is described by Spider many times as a coward. And
okay.
I think this is him living up to that that label.
Absolutely.
And so we fight through and we find this war mech, and destroy it as we do, and free the Batsa district from the Kel's Scourge. And fun little fact, the Batsa district is actually now known as the Eliksni quarter in game. And you can see the remnants of this war mech sitting crumpled in a corner in what we recently turned into the Eliksni quarter town square.
Yeah.
So
I like the little town square area that it is now. It feels like a true like meeting spot. Like there's a little pedestal with a little book, and it's like there's I don't know why there's one Eliksni just like asleep on a bench there. I mean, there's perfectly good cots like over there, but whatever.
They built their symbol of communication and peaceful resolution on the literal bones of an old weapon used as to be an aggressor. So some symbolism there.
Yeah.
But Civics didn't leave the Batsa district empty-handed. He had, through his findings in the vault with this Black Armory tech, he had also found the notes of one of the Black Armory founders, Henrietta Marin. And through those notes, he discovered that there was an even greater prize out there that he did not know about. And so he decodes these notes, which we, as the players at the time, were able to collect by doing the various forge activities, and kind of reassemble and read after the fact. But he used these notes to uncover the secret location of the Berguzia forge in the EDZ, which was also the location of the Niobe Labs. Niobe Labs being the primary location where all of the Black Armory founders would kind of lived for a time, but also developed everything and experimented with their most high-end technology. Ada 1 being one of those.
That was like their main research and development area, right?
Yeah. And so, to Civics, this is a treasure trove. I lost the vault, but now I have access to this experimental Black Armory place. And so he attempts to break into Niobe Labs. Doesn't get access to the lab's information, but does get access to Berguzia Forge. And the Guardian shows up at that forge after seeing that it's been activated. And I believe Ada kind of learns of its location based on the info we get from doing the raid, as well as seeing it like fire up on it within her systems. We get to Berguzia. We put a stop to Civics finally, once and for all, since he has nowhere left to run. And we essentially dissolve the Kel's Scourge.
Chaos can only rule for so long. Like,
yeah,
that's just the nature of chaos. It's not It's fun while it lasted, but then it's quickly fleeting.
Yeah. However, the remnants of Kel's scourge are still felt today in game because the Kel's scourge scientists, I guess, continued to use the knowledge they had learned from the Black Armory to create uh, kind of production line versions of this big war mech that they had with the servitor, which we now know in game as Briggs. And they have
Oh.
either joined up the various Eliksni factions or sold their designs off to other factions, and that is why Briggs are now somewhat prevalent, is because they
Yeah.
learned how to make them through the Black Armory, and their expertise is being used by the various houses that exist.
I always thought they were just like a cute little like nod to Scourge of the Past, and Bungie was just like, "Hey, look, you used to fight this as a raid boss. Now it's everywhere." But there's actual lore in there for it, like the
Yeah,
reason why we see more of these things. That's super cool. That's
yeah.
really cool. I like that.
So that essentially ends our dealings with the Eliksni during the Black Armory time period, and really during post Forsaken altogether. There
Yeah.
wasn't any other major event that was directly related to them until Beyond Light.
So before we jump to there, I'm going to take a roll call on houses again because I like doing this every so often.
Okay.
Uh, what houses do we have left at this point? Judgment, House Light. Mithrax did create House Light uh, at the tomb of Shiraido. I do remember that.
We have the self-proclaimed House of Judgment, which has one person, as far as we know. We have the self-proclaimed House of Light, which has one person, as far as we know.
What is...
And the only other house we know of at this time before Beyond Light is House of Dusk, which is just the rest of the Eliksni trying to survive, essentially.
That's crazy. So you have two lone Eliksnis, and then you have but Spider doesn't have a house. He doesn't claim a house, does he?
Not as far as I know.
He's just Spider.
He's just Spider. He's just the Mafia, essentially.
Right. Because like anywhere where you used to see, and I know it was really prevalent around like the Tangled Shore, but he has like his own little what would you call it? His graffiti symbol.
Yeah, he has his own emblem.
Right. But it's just Spider. It's not like House Spider or House merchandising or whatever.
Yeah. they don't have banners or anything. I don't think it's ever referred to as House Spider or anything like that.
I want it to be House merchandising now so bad. What house are you from, kind Dreg? I'm from merchandising.
Oh, I get this wonderful picture of this movie called Spaceballs.
Yeah.
Of like, we have Spider the flamethrower.
That's literally what it is. We have Spider the lunchbox, Spider the action figure. Oh Jesus. That's canon now. Yep. You know that's canon now, and that's a real thing. I want a Spider lunchbox and a Spider flamethrower.
Oh, that's someday.
Christmas list created.
But so no real major Eliksni presence or really anything other than just survival up until Beyond Light. And so the next thing we're going to talk about is the character Eramis. And to start our discussion about Eramis, we're going to roll back the timeline just a little bit, back to the Prison of Elders, before the prison break. Because Eramis has actually been in the Prison of Elders for a significant amount of time. And that's why she wasn't really out and about in the game prior to Beyond Light very much.
Because the only interaction we Well, I guess it wasn't even an interaction. As far as like the history of the Eliksni, we've talked about her once, and that was during the
The
long
long drift.
drift,
Yep.
when she hands Spider and Civics over to Mithrax's mom as like a like here, this is our tribute. See you later, and then that's it. Like that's the last she's kind of ever heard of throughout history.
Yeah, now we do have a little bit of information about Eramis, and this actually comes to us. We get some of it from just various dialogues that happen throughout the different missions this season and during Beyond Light. But I believe this particular kind of paragraph um, comes to us from another Game Informer article that was written around the time, as a piece about Beyond Light pre-release to the expansion. And in that, they'd give us a little bit of information about Eramis, like kind of a meet the villain sort of thing. And so the early history of Eramis says that Eramis was born on Reese during the era of peace and prosperity brought about when the Great Machine uplifted the Eliksni civilization. During this time, she and her mate Athras had many hatchlings together, and she was a friend of Varric's. However, the whirlwind happened, essentially. This great cataclysmic event, the Eliksni's version of the collapse, happened, and Eramis was one of the few Eliksni who apparently witnessed the traveler abandoning her people, leaving Reese to its destruction. Eramis survived the whirlwind and was consumed with a great rage towards the traveler. And she started a new life as a member of the House of Devils. She elevated herself to the position of Baroness within the house and earned the moniker of Ship Stealer. She would later lead the fallen charge against Guardians of the Last City during the Battle of Twilight Gap, slaughtering hundreds of light bearers to their final deaths. So Eramis was kind of the main military commander of the House of Devils, at least
Holy
during
cow.
the time of the Twilight Gap.
And again, during Twilight Gap, House Devils, they were like, that was the military might there. That was the primary attacking force.
They were point,
there,
at least.
Right. There were other houses at Twilight Gap, but House Devils was the primary up front and had all the walker tanks and everything.
So she has had a great dislike for the Traveler and humanity for quite some time. And apparently sometime during the Wolf Rebellion, during the House of Wolves expansion in D1, she was captured and incarcerated in the Prison of Elders and has essentially been there ever since. So, with that in mind, we're going to start with a reading from the lore book called The Once Ship Stealer. It's going to give us a little bit of information about Eramis as she's in the prison leading up to kind of the big prison break from Varric's releasing everybody that we discussed last episode, and where she goes from there. So this first one is a chapter titled The Prisoner, and it goes like this. In the depths of the prison of elders, Eramis is the Kell of no house. Outside, she is the firebrand of House Devils, the arch-fiend of Twilight Gap, the Ship Stealer. But here, she has no house. Here she reigns all on her own. In the arena where Eliksni runts and leaderless cabal challenge her, she rules with a broken arc spear for a scepter. It's the strongest weapon they'll give her, and she bends it to her will. No matter how many times the ether fat guards try to send her to death in that arena, she triumphs. She kills their champions, watches the ether hiss from their masks, watches the gel leak out of their suits. she begins to cherish the smell of a good fight. Blood, sweat, ether, fear. She imagines that one day a banner will be emblazoned with a broken spear and an inverted crown. House of Anarchy, House of Riot, House of Eramis, House of Nothing. When there is only one Kell, there's no need for houses. Today she fights a centurion of the broken Red Legion. Money changes hands. His pauldrons are scuffed with the memory of battle, and he's given a warhammer. He raises it to the cheers and peacocks for the crowd. Eramis tosses her broken spear between her hands, waiting. Two glowing pinpoint eyes focus on her as the centurion turns. He swings the hammer at her and she rolls out of the way. He swings it again, but she's behind him now and out of his sight line. Like a creature searching for a fly on its back, he struggles to find her. She jams the sparking head of the spear into a notch in his armor and uses the leverage to vault herself onto his shoulder. He rages like a Nirse beast, all fury and stupidity, and nearly throws her from his shoulders. She tries to pull her spear free, but his giant hand knocks her senseless for a moment. The spear releases at the last minute. She grabs the top. An arc energy bites her palm as she jams the tip of the blade under the edge of his helmet and into his neck. He screams. And before he falls, she leaps off and lands on her feet. The crowd never cheers for her. Instead, they whisper. No prison will hold Eramis Kell, they say. Eramis Kell is a devil greater than the devils themselves. Eramis Kell does not know how to lose. And that's the end of that chapter.
Dude, she's brutal. She is.
Oh yeah,
freaking brutal. Like, I mean, and to come from a period from this golden age race, to see the traveler fleet, to go through all that stuff, to go through the long haul, to have to make these deals with different pirate crews just to survive, to be as ruthless as pirates are, to then lead the charge into Twilight Gap and fail, to be with House Devils and fail, like, to still even be alive is kind of a triumph in its own right. And now, as like the gladiator of the arena, but the gladiator that like nobody really wants to cheer on. Like she has no bravado, she has no gusto. She's there, she's efficient, and she wins. Full stop. There's no like flashy show about it. There's no like, like, oh, I'm big bad Cabal, let's go crowd, woo! No, it's there's the enemy, kill it, move on. It's a very I don't know what to call it. It's a very calculated experience, right? Like it just live.
Yep.
No bravado, just live.
It's very cold, very clinical, very
stab
here, be done with it.
Yep. Yep.
So, and I should have prefaced this with the first one. I am on the tail end of being sick, so apologies if my voice is a little wonky. I may or may not do some of the normal things I do because of that, but yeah, that's why if you hear anything.
Still some of the best voice acting this side of Twilight Gap.
Yeah. But no, so we're going to continue on with chapter 2 of this book, which is called The Wolf. And here we see Eramis meet a character from Beyond Light for the first time. And we see how their kind of camaraderie starts. So this one goes like this. The neighboring cell holds a wolf. She ignores him at first. He's too greedy for her acknowledgement. Sometimes he reminds her of the needy dregs that followed her old Kell like carrion birds, squawking for attention and squabbling over kills. What the Eliksni have lost, more than anything else, is dignity. Eventually, the wolf learns to intrigue her. He calls himself Paraxis, and he has ideas. But he's young. He thinks every idea he conceives of is the first and the best of its kind. She suspects he's never had to report directly to a Kell. He likes to talk about machines, building them and bending them to his will. He has a mad idea about recapturing the great machine, binding it in arc wire and making it give them its power. He's been listening to the stories about Gaul. She lets him talk, and she asks him questions. Every question is a whetstone. Every conversation is a test, and it will only take one failure to lose her interest. The great machine made the Eliksni great, she says, until it left us. When it did, we were weaker than when it arrived. Why do you seek its touch again? To return us to that strength, he says. His voice is muffled through the wall between them, but the arrogance comes through clear. How can you build strength on a foundation of weakness? She asks. Each word is a needle. Each word should sting him with revelation. And he remains silent. Did the great machine make the Eliksni strong? Or did it draw out strength that was already within us? She asks. Again, silence. She tilts her head back, looking at the dark ceiling of her cell. Reliance is the greatest weakness. Remember that. You are playing with a child's stacking spheres. He's silent so long, she begins to wonder if he was even worth her time. And then, he says, then I will create new spheres. And she closes her eyes and smiles. That's the end of that chapter.
I like this one. This is very much like what you see in a typical Hollywood movie of, like, you know, jailer meets jailer, or prisoner meets prisoner rather, and they each one is kind of testing the other. Like, I don't feel like Praxis really has much to bring to this this relationship between Eramis and Praxis, but he he reminds me very much of, like, an engineer. They want to find the most complicated answer just to show off their skill as an engineer, whereas, like, the simplest answer would probably be the most efficient. But he still wants to prove himself for sure. And I mean, the questioning here is very interesting. Like, for Eramis to think of the Great Machine as just like this, like, hey, we were weak, we were greater before it came to us, and then when it left us, we were so much weaker than that previous time. So, like, what was the purpose of it? So I'm starting to see more of her her hatred, her rage towards the Great Machine through this one, of like, because and we talked about this before, of, like, you know, when Spider came to power, that was like one avenue for the Eliksni people to go through, and then there was, like, the House of Dusk, that was another avenue for people to kind of go through, and it's interesting to me to see Eramis as this, like, to hell with the Great Machine, I don't want anything to do with it, I want it killed and destroyed more than anything, it seems. And it's very much that rage that you talked about, that she just doesn't want any part of it.
Yeah, and I think it's also her. I think what she is angry at the most, other than just the traveler itself, is that her people are still so reliant on it. Even just the idea of it is what's driving so many of them. And she talks about like reliance is the biggest weakness, like, and is trying to get the point that like we should not be looking for something else to make us stronger. We should be looking to understand that we can make ourselves stronger even without it. Like, why we don't need it. It didn't grant us power. It just gave us the ability to use power we already had but didn't know we had.
Yeah, that like strengthness within type thing.
Yeah. So like I think it's Eramis on one hand being like the Eliksni are better than what they think they are, and she honestly the biggest comparison I can draw here is Eramis I think sees the Eliksni people as like drug addicts essentially. Like they all feel like they need this thing to be complete, to be better, and she's trying to say like no, fuck that thing. Like, no,
I've never thought of it like that, but that's pretty apt, man. That's because you think about it, like every single Eliksni really does like worship this thing, and I mean the whole long drift, they literally were chasing this thing across the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Man, and then for Eramis to see it as like, no, this is, you're all crazy, you're all addicted to this thing. Man, that's a thought.
So
holy shit. Okay.
It, adds another layer of hatred, of blame, I guess. Because, to anyone that has a someone they're close with that is struggling with something like that, the thought process at some point is like, man, I wish this substance just didn't exist. Like, or you direct, the hatred is directed at this thing that is messing up the life of this person, and like
absolutely.
I think she's viewing it through that same kind of lens.
God, that got real quick. Holy shit.
Yeah.
that was okay. You're gonna make me cry this episode, aren't you?
I mean, there's nothing, I don't think, anything quite as somber as what we've had in previous episodes, but we'll see.
I hope not. But that's a thought though, like to think of the Traveler itself as an addiction, as a drug to the Eliksni people, that they were so enthralled with it when it did bring out that strength within them that now they can't think of anything else. Like that's all they can focus on now. That's the definition of addiction. Holy shit.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And it really makes you wonder, like,
oh my god,
maybe she's not wrong.
Are we?
I mean,
are the Guardian? Holy shit.
So we're just gonna leave that little bombshell there.
Yup.
And move on to chapter 3 of this book, which is entitled "The Traitor," and it goes like this: On the day of the prison break, Eramis is nursing a gut wound. It's not fatal, or at least she doesn't think so. She won the match in the arena, but not before an arrogant captain drove a sword into her side. It cut through her devil robes and left a bloom of blood that reminds her of the water flowers on Reese. Aethris had loved water flowers. She's dozing when Varix arrives at her cell. Eramis. She opens her eyes and then narrows them immediately. Despite the wound, she stands, too quick, gets a little dizzy, but steps towards the cell door. Traitor, she says in greeting. Varix flinches. He shakes his head, lowers his eyes. Even with the door between them, she can see his fear. There is change to come, he says quietly in Eliksni, and then looks over his shoulder. His eyes dart back and forth, fearful, suspicious. He switches suddenly to the clumsy language of the Guardians. Change Varix will make, yes? change Varix will lead. But Varix, too, will need a leader. Eramis laughs. You wish to make me your prisoner, Kel? No, Varix cringes. Varix wishes. I do not care what you wish, Varix the Loyal, she says. There are Eliksni who changed in the shadow of prison bars. They fall, they shrink. But Eramis has grown. She must show Varix that even with this steel between them, he is smaller. He is still a dreg pretending to be a vandal. If there is justice in this world, one day I will dock your last 2 arms and leave you for dead. Something in Varix's eyes harden. They share a tense silence. And finally he says in a voice as cold as ether, Do not say that Varix did not try to help. And he leaves, and Eramis settles herself again on the floor of her cell. Later that day, an alarm sounds. The warden projects a message in Varix's voice, and the doors of her cell open, unprompted, as frenzied Eliksni and Cabal charge through the prison, thirsting for freedom. And that's the end of that chapter.
I mean, he tried.
Mm-hmm.
He tried to give her an avenue. But, I mean, I guess when you're that self-dependent, and also looking at Varix the traitor, like that's literally what every Eliksni, and I guess I never really put these two things together. Every Eliksni really sees Varix as a traitor.
Oh, yes.
But then Varix himself sees him as like the only true remaining Eliksni. So I mean, and those two line of thinking don't coincide. They're very, so it's no wonder that like when he put out his call to like, hey, everyone come join House Judgment, we got snacks and cake and shit, and everyone's like, nah, I'm good. How about chaos? Let's let chaos reign for a bit. Yeah, let's do that. So yeah, it's I see both sides of it here, right? Like I see Varix, like, you know, he's so ready to make the Eliksni great again, and to make them, well, not great again, to return them to their kind of former like golden age. And I don't know. Is it ever said that Varix is more of a traveler follower, or more of a like Reese, let's be old school Eliksni again follower?
It doesn't really specify. I get the feeling that he's not necessarily pro traveler, but he's also not hateful towards it like Eramis is.
Sure.
He just wants Eliksni to go back to their culture,
sure,
of the Golden Age.
Sure. Well, or even pre-Golden Age.
Yeah.
Like he wants that level of like, hey, there should be a House Rain, there should be a House Stone, there should be, you know, we should be Eliksni again. We don't necessarily need the Traveler, but the Traveler isn't necessarily pure evil. Like it's neither here nor there thing for him. Okay, but then obviously Eramis on the other side of this, like, no, to hell with that thing. And then to look at him, for him to offer her like, hey, I've got a spot for you in my uprising thing, come join me, and she's like, you go to hell, and he's like, all right, well, you know, I tried, and then walks away and lets everyone free.
Yeah. And so we're going to take a quick break from the Ship Stealer book, because there is something that happens between chapter 3 and chapter 4 where actually our player character is introduced to Eramis for the very first time. And this takes place during a mission called 0 Hour.
Oh, so, my God. Oh my god. Okay, I may not cry this episode, but I may get super excited.
So the 0 hour mission was a secret mission, very similar to like the Whisper of the Worm mission, that was started by discovering a fallen transponder. And that transponder, you had to activate the nodes on that transponder by going to different areas and completing objectives. I forget exactly what the process was.
It was a bunch of lost sectors. You had to go to different lost sectors,
Okay. Yep.
and do something in the lost sector. I think most of them were just like, beat the lost sector, but I think some of them were like beat the lost sector while having a rocket launcher or something equipped, and it would change the code or something like that.
Yeah. But once you activated all of the transponders on this signal device, uh, you got a message essentially from Mithrax that was telling the player guardian that there is danger in the old tower, and to meet Mithrax at a location. That location being the farm, which was a social space in Destiny 2 for a little while. We see a little bit of the perspective of Mithrax about this in the lore card for the Outbreak Perfected gun, which is coincidentally what you get from completing the 0 hour mission. So the lore on the gun reads like this. The captain stands with his primary hands braced on a command table. He stares down at a static, hollow projection as though it might reveal some new secret. Nearby, the hunter combs through scout reports. The warlock taps rapidly at a datapad, running simulation after simulation. No one speaks. There is a deafening boom. The hollow projection flickers, and the whole skiff tilts 70 degrees off kilter. The captain holds tight to the table, reaching out with a secondary arm to snatch the hunter as he goes toppling by. The warlock is not a concern. She has blinked her way to a secure handhold. The captain calls to his crew, speaking Eliksni, too fast for the hunter or the warlock to follow. But someone calls back. The skiff tilts noisily and then stabilizes. Eramis? The warlock asks. The captain nods. Letting go of the hunter, he disappears through an access hatch to consult with his crew. I don't like this, the hunter says lowly. We should be there with him. The warlock chews on her lower lip. She doesn't like it either, but they've argued endlessly with their captain and gained no ground. We have to trust him, she says finally. This is what he wants. Trust him to die? The hunter hisses. Let's break down how stupid that is. Not only does he want to infiltrate the tower without us, he's planning to wear devil's colors to interrupt a devil's heist to reclaim Siva. And instead of leaning on us, his good guardian friends, he's banking on some stranger. Not a stranger, the warlock cuts in. Fine, not a stranger, but definitely not a friend. The hunter grits his teeth. We should do it. We need to do it. Let's just go. Just go now. We can cut them off. He conjured his ghost with a twist of his wrist, readying for transmat. We have to trust him, the warlock repeats, reaching out to grasp the hunter's forearm. I think he's right when he says it doesn't mean anything if we do it. Guardians do extraordinary things all the time, and he needs more allies. The captain re-enters their little ad hoc war room. They draw up guiltily. The hunter hides his ghost. All well? He asks, looking between them. Yeah, Mithrax, the warlock murmurs. We're all good. The hunter says nothing. We walk this hardship path with joyful hearts. Be brave. And that's the end of that lore card.
That the Mithrax in this lore card is definitely that post Ido Mithrax. Like
Yes.
he's very like he very much has that air about. He still has a little bit of the old ways in him, right? Like that whole like the captain of his crew, and he's
Mm-hmm.
still like he doesn't necessarily trust the Guardians, but he doesn't necessarily not trust them. But this is very much a yeah. I oh, God, I just want to talk about Zero Hour because that mission was fucking awesome. But yeah, this is very much a Mithrax that is wanting to make make good for his people, and I like the way that the Guardians put it there. Like Guardians do extraordinary things all the time. Like it's nothing. It really is nothing to the Eliksni people if we go do something super cool and super crazy. But if an Eliksni does it, now that means something. Now that's a sign. That's a so so for Mithrax wanting to do that, I can see both sides. But again, like I said, seeing the hunter and the warlock side, like, hey, we could just go help. Let's just go get whatever he needs for him and take care of this. But then on Mithrax's side of like, hey, I need to do this as the new House of Light Kel or leader, whatever, to show people that House of Light is the way to go, to show that I can be a Kel, to show that I can be a leader. That's yeah, that there's something to be said in that.
Yeah, and to give credence to the thought that Mithrax is not an enemy. So the stranger they're referring to that Mithrax is banking on assisting him with this is us, is the player
Yeah,
guardian.
some random VIP 2014 dude.
So they are, concerned about him trusting a the guardian to assist him in this and not, fire on sight essentially. Uh but he's trusting in the fact that we spared him once before
Yeah,
and that he is going, this is going to be a net benefit for everybody if accomplishing the recovery of this Siva weapon, which is the Outbreak Perfected.
yeah,
And the person that is trying to steal this Siva weaponry is none other than Eramis. When we go through this mission, which we are going through the ruins of the old Destiny 1 tower, which is really, really cool to do. And we're traversing through the tower, and we have to take some liberties in how we get to where we need to go, by going through some ventilation shafts.
yeah. We have to worry about Trevor,
Yes,
who
we have to
is
fight off, or not fight off. We get to run from
run
Trevor.
the fuck away from. God, it's so awesome. He's in this little like it's like a little figure-8 maze, right? So that's it's maybe it's bigger than a figure. Anyway, there's all these little pathways and there's 4 switches and you have to hit all 4 switches to open a door to continue on. But the whole time he's just a death machine. It's TR-3V-0R, I think, is his name. So it's
Something
Trevor
like that, yeah.
is what it spells out. And he's literally like, it's just this robot that's on like skids or something with just like mashing teeth in front of it, this grinder of mashing stuff in front of it, that as soon as it touches you, you die. And it has this giant red light that like shines down the entire hallway, so you can hear it and you can see it when it gets near, but then there's nowhere to go. This hallway is like, I mean, it's exactly that. It's a hallway, so you have to like duck into these little side patches or crouch underneath these little deals, and it's probably one of the coolest experiences that is no longer in game, that I do truly miss. It's that 0 hour mission in Trevor was something special, to get through that.
Yeah, and when you get to the end of the mission to, fight the big boss is Eramis.
Yeah,
She's there to try and reclaim this Siva tech. Being from House Devils, she knows about Siva, the Devil
yep,
Splicers, knows how powerful it is, and having freshly escaped, or not freshly, but having escaped from the Prison of Elders, is trying to amass power to, enact her revenge against the traveler in some way. And so she hears about the Siva tech and invades the old tower to try and get it. And Mithrax not only warns us and tells us where to go because this incursion is happening, uh, he's narratively helping us along the way. In the mission, not really, but narratively, like he does appear in the mission a few times to kind of indicate where we're supposed to be going, that kind of thing. But he doesn't, he doesn't fire shots or anything.
Yeah. But he does hop in at the end though, doesn't he? Like he drops in and like gives us a bow and
Yeah,
and drops
he
out.
he makes himself known near the end of the mission after we've kind of fought back Eramis and whatnot. And it's safe to say that we would not have known to be there to fight her if he had not stepped in. So played a significant part in that. And Eramis is not happy
Oh no.
about all of this. And we actually see Eramis's side of the aftermath of the 0 Hour mission in the next chapter of Ship Stealer, which is chapter 4, titled "The Visionary," and that one goes like this: In the first several months of her freedom, Eramis curses Mithrax the Forsaken. He is a wish-to-be Kel, a captured traitor, a four-armed dreg, cringing before a false queen, playing pretend among the enemies of the Eliksni, and worst of all, the most humiliating, he has beaten Eramis. She has failed to acquire the Siva weapon, failed to shame the Guardians, failed to reignite the fires of the House of Devils, and her failure haunts her. Now she sits in the bridge of her stolen ketch, straight-spined, staring at some distant point that she has long passed, one she can never return to. Atrax, the youngest of her council, watches her from across the room. She closes the gap between them. "Michael," she says. She has a voice like a child. Eramis is quiet for a beat longer than she needs to be. Finally, she says, "You are too young to remember the old house, what the devils were before." Atrax bows her head out of respect. "This failure has no sting for you," Eramis bites, bitter. Atrax keeps her head bowed, and slowly she raises it. Her eyes dart over Eramis's face, searching. "I am too young to remember," she agrees. "But my eyes are clear. I can see what the devils will be." Eramis opens her mouth to remind Atrax of her place, and then pauses. Something in her mind has unlocked. She stands to her full towering height, stretches her second set of arms. "No," she says. Clarity has descended on her like a Reese rain shower. "The devils are nothing." She begins to walk out of the room, purpose in her step, fire reignited in her belly. "The devils are dead. House of Anarchy, House of Ruin, House of Eramis. We must become something new now." And that's the end of that reading.
Again, we see that change in a single Eliksni. Like for Eramis to look at all these failure points, like obviously pissed at Mithrax for beating her to the punch, but I mean, for her to see like devils are nothing. Like this is a garbage path. Like we have to change. We have to evolve. We have to become something new. It's the same thinking that we saw with Spider, with Varix, with Fickrel. I mean, all of these different Eliksni that have looked at what is happening to them and around them and going, we suck. we are not gaining any type of headway. We're not making our people great again. We're failing horribly. Something has to change. And for Eramis to see that and to act on it and be like, okay, we must become something new. It's yeah, I like it. It's yeah, I like it. That's all
Yeah.
there is.
She is in her own way uh saying we need to cast aside the old houses. We need to stop trying to revive these these relics that we assigned ourselves when we first got to the soul system. We need to start making things. We need to start building things.
That is interesting too, right? Because like the whole time that from Reese that so the whole timeline from Reese to the Golden Age to the Traveler leaving to the Whirlwind to the Long Haul, that whole time starting with the Traveler, they're always trying to like go back. Every Eliksni we've come across is trying to like go back to the old ways, go back to the why can't it just be like this? And now throughout and it's more recent history that this has started to happen, more like around the Forsaken time frame and forward, where we're starting to see a lot of these Eliksni look at this and go, no, there's got to be a better way. Like probably the only one that's really truly kind of still clinging to that idea would be Varix, to be like the old school Eliksni. But every other Eliksni that has come forward and said a change needs to happen, it's not that they're completely abandoning the old ways or the old cultures or anything, but they know that they have to move forward as a people, as a species, as a race. They can't just keep living in the past of, oh man, I wish we were like the way we were on Reese. That was awesome, wasn't it? Yep. Okay, well I guess I'm gonna go get killed by a Guardian today. Bye, Bob. Like they can't keep living that way. They've got to evolve. They've got to become something new. And each one of these different leaders, and I put that kind of in quotations, uh, are trying to find what that new thing is, what that change is.
Yeah, and as Eramis makes this decision to, cast away, to no longer be bound by her old house, the House of Devils, she has some subconscious reservations about that, that we actually see in the next chapter titled "The Nightmare." And it goes like this. As she dissolves the old bonds of House of Devils, Eramis is haunted by the shadowed dreams. In one, she relives Twilight Gap. She lunges, driving a sword into the belly of a guardian, grunting as they yell and crumble forward. Another guardian rushes at her head on before she has time to yank the sword free. But she hears the sound of a shock rifle firing behind her, and leans abruptly to the right as the shot flies by and hits the guardian before her with full force. She looks back to see Cretus, shimmering with the purple glow of the void as her servitor shields her. Cretus tips her head in acknowledgement of Eramis and turns to fire into another cluster of guardians. Eramis rips her sword free and forges ahead. They're closing in on the city now. Guardians are falling all around her. They're so close. Fast, heavy footfalls come up behind her. Phylaxis, ferocious and bloodthirsty, shouts to Eramis as she attacks a towering, broad-shouldered guardian. Eramis ducks and slides out of the way. As Phylaxis makes contact with the guardian's head, Eramis slashes the beast across his side with her sword. He loses his balance and she kicks his hip, tipping him towards Phylaxis. In these days, Phylaxis was almost always fighting with bare hands, and she breaks his neck. Eramis pushes forward. So close. A ferocious laugh erupts to her right, and then the thundering blast of a scorch cannon. Tanix, a blur of whirring machinery, creates explosions of earth and flesh and blood all around them. And he keeps laughing. So close. But then, before her, a blinding flash of gold. She sees Eliksni burst into flame and ash around her as gun fires one shot after another. Pools of shining light are the only trace of the victims. The guardian wielding it is like a tiny sun. Another shot, Cretus's servitor. Another, Cretus herself. Eramis remembers losing, but she does not remember this. Doesn't remember seeing Phylaxis evaporate into blowing ash. Doesn't remember the shot that hits her in the chest, or the burning fire that explodes through her limbs, or her own terrified scream. And she wakes with a jolt, breathless. That's the end of that chapter.
Ball. Shivers. Ball. Ball. That's all I have. So obviously these events didn't actually happen the way they are described here, right? Like Phylax and Cretus, none of them were with her there at Twilight Gap, correct?
I think some of them were. I think Cretus at the very least was, but I don't think they died at Twilight Gap.
Right. Well, because obviously, like Phylax was in the prison next to her, right. And obviously Tanix is. All right, I'll give you that one. He might have actually died, but anyway, that's Tanix.
That's a temporary state for Tanix.
My favorite meme is the name 3 Destiny bosses, and the guy turns around and he goes Tanix, and the other guy goes, all right, that's on me. Yeah. But I mean, to have this is very much like her seeing. I think of this as like a symbolic way of her seeing her own dreams fail, like to see the people around her just failing and falling, and like it's obviously terrifying to think of life that way, and it's hard to move past it. Like that's definitely a terrifying thing here throughout this whole thing. Like to think that one single guardian, this tiny little sun, can just evaporate everything around them with just shot after shot after shot. But that's the reality that she lives in. That truly is like that's a thing that could happen. Everything that she knows and believes in could be taken away from her just like that. A single golden gun, just pop, pop, pop. There went 3 of her, 3 of her closest allies, and then pop, there she goes, and that's it. So yeah, that's a definite fear on her side.
Yeah, and I think it's very purposeful that this is a dream that's playing into this fear and this like inferiority and this inevitability of trying to fight guardians. And she describes this, or it's described as being haunted by shadowed dreams.
Yeah.
And I want to remember that, being haunted by shadowed dreams. And these are not dreams that she's remembering things exactly how they happened. They're dreams that are taking events and twisting them to show kind of this powerlessness of her. So remember that when we read the very next one, which is titled The Herald, and see where that thought process takes you. So the Herald goes like this. The dreams persist. They are old memories, but twisted, battling a guardian in the prison of elders and falling before their light. Athris banging on the walls of her sleeping pod, calling for the great machine. She can't sleep. Something in the dreams is telling her to travel to Earth's moon, and she follows the sign. On the moon, she fights through corpse-stinking hive like swarms of flies. Their fetid stench is unbearable, worse than the carcass piles at the prison, worse than the battlefield of Twilight Gap. They eat and breathe death, and she resents their breath upon her, so she cuts through them like so much tall grass. A night stalks her deep into the catacombs, staying on the edge of her hearing, matching her footsteps. She lets it make the first strike, and when it does, she cracks its exoskeleton armor with her sword. The thrill of the fight, hearing the night howl as it meets death, is almost comforting, a reprieve from her unsettling dreams. She's painted with hive blood as she continues her advance, and when she finally comes upon the ship, a familiar sight causes her to freeze in her tracks. She remembers this fleet. She remembers seeing them in the sky like black arrows. She remembers the space where the great machine was, and then the blank space where it wasn't. It was all a lesson in dependence, one that took many years to learn. This time, the black arrow speaks to her. She knows it's not Eliksni. It is not the clumsy tongues of earth, nor the littling speech of the reef. It's something else. A whisper, but one that is so loud, but somehow understood so perfectly. Stop waiting, it says. No one is coming for you. You must be your own salvation. She feels something in all four of her hands, a tingle, a buzz. It reminds her of the broken arc spear. She clenches and unclenches her fists, staring at the sleek surface of the ship. There's power here, power that she can grasp. But not yet. A waking dream strikes her like lightning. She's transported. The bleak gray dust of the moon falls away, and she stands in a white plain of whipping ice and snow. It blinds her, chases her breath away. And then she's on the moon again, and the whispers are silent. And she knows where she must go next. And that's the end of that chapter.
Salvation. Yeah, this is awesome. This is awesome to see. Like, there's a lot of obvious things here, or at least I feel like there's a lot of obvious things here. The darkness is talking to her. The darkness is feeding her those dreams, because and we've talked about this before. The whole thing with darkness is memory, like it plays into the memory. That's the whole thing. That's why Savathun had us get the piece of the glaive, so that way we would take it to the forge. That way it would remember what it was, and we could draw out the memories of the glaive and continue on. Because that's the whole thing with the whole thing with darkness is memory, whereas like the light is like making you forget, like you get rezzed with nothing, complete amnesia, you're a brand new person, start over from scratch type thing. And so for the darkness to play these nightmares for her, for Eramis, and to twist them, right, to show them that she is weak without whatever it is that she's looking for, whatever it is that in this case the darkness feels like it can give her the salvation. And so of course it draws her to the moon, shows her where she comes across the pyramid ship in the moon, and then it shows her another pyramid ship on a icy, wispy planetoid, which I assume is Europa. Like that's kind of, I feel like that's a little too on point. But yeah, that's darkness. That's darkness for you.
Yep. It is just showing her like, look at how powerless you are. Look at how insignificant your efforts are. Stop waiting for someone to save you. Take the power to save yourself is essentially the temptation it's giving her.
Yeah.
And so she knows now, like, there is power to be had, but not yet. Like there is power coming that I need to prepare for. And that shows her Europa as the place to do that, to prepare for it. And she does, but interestingly, like, and this is something I've always liked about Eramis's character, even though I don't think it's focused on nearly enough in game, at least. At the end of the day, Eramis s- still wants what she thinks is best for her people. Like, she wants revenge,
Yes.
absolutely. She wants revenge. She hates the Traveler. She, wants to harm it in some way, and the agents of the Traveler. But a big motivation for her is also to make a better place for her people. And
Yes, absolutely.
she's maybe not going about that in a way that we agree with, but that is her end goal. And we see that on Europa. We see that with what is built there.
Yes. All of Reese Reborn. Like that's I mean, it's called Reese Reborn for a reason.
Yeah. So we kind of see the initial building of that in the next chapter here, which is titled "The Scribe," and it goes like this: Eramis and Varix stand in the shadow of a half-constructed city. Her people have salvaged bits and pieces from the Eliksni hideouts across the system and lashed them into the ruins of a Golden Age facility, building something new from something old. It's Eliksni flesh on the bones of humanity's failure, nestled in the icy tundra of Europa. She watches Varix's face as he looks up. There's something familiar there, an awe that she remembers from a long time ago. It will be a new Reese, she says, raising her eyes to the scaffolding before them. A new home for our people. No more running, no more living on the outskirts. Varix looks away, finally, to meet Eramis's eyes. What of the devils? He speaks Eliksni. It surprises her. Old names, she says, dismissive. Leave the old names and the old ways in the past. Just as she remembers, Varix doesn't let his awe stand in the way of practicality. His gaze has turned appraising. And why choose this place? Why choose this frozen moon? I saw it in a dream. She can feel his skepticism. She doesn't blame him. Actually, since the prison break, he's been hiding somewhere, some forgotten corner of the system, waiting for his own judgment to come. He gifted his people with freedom, and then built himself a cell of isolation. He can't see beyond what he thinks he knows. And why do you call for me? He asks. There's a hardness in his voice. After everything, we are not allies, Eramis. Old ways, she says again. If the Eliksni are to survive, we need to abandon all memory of division. Petty squabbles, house politics. I want to wipe it all clean. She looks up at the scaffolding again. This will be a new world, Varix. New ideas, new stories. We will be known and remembered as something new. Varix follows her gaze. Now his voice has softened. And why me? Eramis turns to face him fully now. He fears her still. She sees it in the hunch of his shoulders, the way he turns his face to the side as if looking at her head on would hurt his eyes. In the new world, she says, I will need a scribe. And that's the end of that chapter.
I love it. I I I love it for lots of reasons, but I think the main thing that I love this entry for is to it Aramis seems to finally be I don't know how to put it, like it she seems to finally be taking control of her own destiny, but it's kind of false. That like the darkness showed her this, but it's not it. God, it's not her destiny. I don't feel like, but it is. So it like I don't know. Everything I know of Eramis today, now, currently, all of this stuff, seeing the way she went through this stuff, it just seems like she really was destined to be. I don't want to say controlled by darkness, but definitely led by darkness.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think if Eramis had decided to build Reese Reborn and bring on Varix as a scribe, as a council member or whatever, um, and just her plan was, we are going to make this work. We are going to live here and make our own little civilization in this corner of the soul system. And she abandoned, as she says, if she had abandoned the old ways or her old ideas of needing to have power and needing to have the ability to avenge past losses, I think Reese Reborn could have turned into an Eliksni society.
Absolutely.
I don't know if it would have had peaceful relations with the tower, but I don't know that the tower would have necessarily tried to like burn out Reese Reborn if they were just stayed to themselves, you know?
You're right. Like why go after something that isn't a threat? Or maybe not something that isn't a threat. Why go after something that isn't actively seeking to attack you? But like what you're saying with Eramis's ideas of still wanting that revenge, of that still being the driving thing behind her wanting to make the Eliksni people great again. That really is like the whole. I don't want to say downfall of Reese Reborn, but that really is what's kind of like what's holding her back.
And this is an interesting topic because Eramis becomes I guess spoilers, Eramis becomes known as the Kell of Darkness. Everyone should be aware of that at this point. Um Mithrax is the Kell of Light, of House Light. And darkness has been about memory, has been about remembering those that have tried to take advantage of you in the past, those that have wronged you in the past. Ikora explains in the collector's edition stuff of Witch Queen, explains that like the light the light wipes memory to provide people the opportunity to put old conflicts behind them and approach people with a grace and forgiveness they may not otherwise have. And the dark is memory, so that when somebody does wrong you or tries to take advantage of you, you can remember it from that moment on to not be taken advantage of again.
That's such an exacting thing, right? Like it, like to be forced to remember, hey, that guy screwed you. Remember that. I mean, that all that's going to do is like I don't want to say the darkness is hatred and bad, but
No.
I mean it's cause it's like the same thing that the Guardian is asked. Like, are you good? Like, light isn't inherently good and darkness isn't inherently bad. It just that's what gets assigned to them. Or like, the Guardian's like, well, I hope so. I think I'm good. Like it's God, that's such a
I just find it interesting the philosophies of the two Kells kind of match with the philosophies presented by Ikora for the the powers, the forces. You have Mithrax, Kell of Light, who is offering unconditional forgiveness for the sake of trying to have to make something better. And the Kell of Darkness is stuck on this idea of we need power to defend ourselves from those that have wronged
Yeah.
us before. And this is the moment, this lore card, where if Eramis had taken the other route, if Eramis had said, you know what, I'm not interested in finding power. I want to trust that I can build something without having to, have an arms race essentially to be able to defend it. I I feel like Reese Reborn like would have been it. Would have been
Yeah.
the big Eliksni revival.
Yep.
But I mean, even in a real world example, it's really hard and understandable for, let's say, a country. If we assume the Reese Reborn takes on the role of a sovereign nation of sorts, it would be unthinkable for a nation to pop into the global, world, the global sphere, and say, like, we're not going to have a military force, we're not going to have any means of defending ourselves, we're just going to trust that our neighbors will leave us alone and leave us to our own best interest. Like, conventional wisdom says that's a bad idea.
You're not just going to like pop into existence, like you said, and just
Right.
not have a way to defend yourself in a world of crazy amounts of power. So it truly is hard to be like, well, we're just going to exist and we just want to exist peacefully. It's just it's so
And
hard.
that's the thing I don't think is communicated well in game about Eramis, is that what she did, her whole, like, from a militaristic standpoint, from a, like, cultural perspective standpoint of how to deal with global, or I guess in her case, system wide politics, she made a lot of the right moves, except she became an aggressor. But she gathered power to defend this newly formed city, these newly formed people, with the intention, I think, at least at the beginning, of keeping them safe.
Yep.
And got a little greedy with it and decided to try and use it offensively, and we ended up where we did. But
yeah. No, I love when we find real world parallels in game, and that truly does. It makes me think of Israel. It makes me think of this nation that comes up and says, "Hey, we want to exist peacefully. We've been attacked. We've been aggressed against. Like, we just want to be like. Is that a state that can exist?" And then to be like, okay, well, if we want to be defended, and so then it obviously escalates from there. It's yeah, it's 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 creepy to see that there are parallels from lore cards and characters and events in Destiny to our obviously the real world and the current state of the world. But it's also kind of like a little like telling, right? Like, it's like, look at your own selves, try to learn from this. Like, I don't know, it's such a I don't know,
yeah.
man.
So bringing it back into the lore bits again. Eramis is building the city. She's got Varix on board, who has essentially isolated himself up till this point. He freed all the Eliksni that were in the prison of elders. He freed his people, but built himself a prison of isolation, as Eramis describes. And she's trying to bring him back into the fold, trying to be, trying to say, like, we have the common goal of wanting our people to flourish. So help me with this. Like, be a part of my group that is trying to make this happen. And we see next Eramis connecting with another old friend of hers, in lore card titled The Council. And that one goes like this. There's a bloody grin in Phylax's voice as she clasps Eramis's hand and pulls her close to her chest. Cretus stands behind Phylax, tall and ethereal. They're exactly as Eramis remembers. Phylax chuckles. I always said no prison will hold her. Eramis laughs, easy and familiar. It's as if nothing has changed. She's transported back to her House of Devils days, the days of assignments in the darkest, grimest parts of her old stomping grounds, the Cosmodrome, with no one but these two for company. They laid waste to memories of encroaching houses, razed human settlements to the ground, dreamed about the day they could challenge and strike down their own Kell to take up the mantle for themselves. But Cretus looks behind Eramis, not at her, and soon Phylax does the same. Her eyes narrow. She lurches forward past Eramis to grab Varix by his neck. Traitor Dreg, Phylax hisses and spits, cringing little. Varix scrambles and kicks like a creature in a trap. Phylax, he gasps. Praxis and Atrax stand to the side, waiting to meet the veterans of the old house. They watch without concern, though Praxis looks pleased. They do not intervene. Phylax tightens her fist. Let him go, Ermis says. Phylax looks at Eramis and then drops Varix. She says nothing, but Eramis can feel her disapproval. Cretus's, too. Doubt creeps into their mind. His crimes are undeniable, Eramis says, dismissive. She doesn't look at Varix, but hears his tortured breathing as he scrambles back. But he's all that remains of House Judgment. You've no special love for scribes, Cretus says skeptically. Eramis inclines her head. No, but a scribe who can draw the ear of the reef, Eliksni. Phylax grunts in understanding, but still looks unimpressed. She returns to Cretus's side. Cretus, on the other hand, looks pleased. Clever, she says. Before they can question her further, Eramis changes the subject. But I didn't call you here for politics. She gestures with one of her secondary arms. Come, let me show you what we've built. And that's the end of that chapter.
It's like the meeting of minds, right? It's like every big name, like Eramis, Phylax, Cretus, Varix is there. There were two others there, and I'm trying to find them again. Anyway, Atrax, Praxis, like there's all these big names. Eliksnis I mean, it's everyone, and some of these, and for some reason, every time I hear Phylax, I'm remembering like Phylax the Defiled. Was he? Did we face him in the arena in Challenge of Elders in D1?
It was Psylocke the Defiled.
Psylocke. Yeah. That's what it was. Okay. That's what I'm remembering. Okay. I'm glad you I'm glad you remember that, because I kept, for some reason I kept connecting those in my brain. Again, that's what my brain does. It sounds familiar. It's the same thing. But yeah, it's literally like this meeting of like all the great all the big names Eliksni that are still around, and they're all they're patting each other on the back like, hey, my man Cretus, let's go, what's up, man? Like, and then to see Varix the traitor like, fuck that guy, he needs to die. but for Eramis to be, I mean, she really did she's showing a leadership skills here to be like, hey, there's a little bit of aggression there, she understands it, let it kind of happen, get it out of the way, and then be like, hey, this is why he's important. Whether you like to, and the fact that her, let him go, and Phylax does, like, it's that gives more credence to her leadership, to them respecting her as a leader. So yeah, I still think, again, thinking back to our discussion on the previous card, if she had not fully given into the darkness, this would have been a wonderful place.
Yeah.
Reese Reborn would have been reborn. Like it would have been Reese Reborn. It would have been great. Like it's I don't know. It's sad now to think of the state that it could have been, or the state that it is, and versus the state that it could have been.
No, absolutely. And we kind of we see kind of the fate of Reese Reborn sealed with the very next chapter, which is titled The Kell of Darkness. And it says this: When the obsidian ship descends on Europa, Eramis is prepared. Her council by her side, Varix, Vilax, Cretus, Praxis, and Atrax. She greets its arrival with bated breath. The foreign whispers return. This time they say, "Do not wait to be chosen. Choose for yourself. Choose salvation." Eramis boards the ship and chooses strength. And it is in this moment, as she holds this cold, ancient power in her hands, that House Salvation is born. And that's the end of that card.
That's it. That's that right there seals Eramis's fate. Like she is forever, from this point on, she is forever driven by greed and revenge and the memory, right? Like that's the memory of wanting to be rid of the traveler, to take revenge on it. Like it's yeah.
So with that, that is where we're going to end our episode this evening.
Okay, so one last head count on houses. We've got House of Salvation now. We've got House of Light. And then, do we still have House of Judgment? Are we still counting that as a...
I don't really think House of Judgment turned into anything.
It really didn't. It just kind of got like absorbed.
I mean...
But was House Judgment always the scribes?
I think so. And Eramis refers to Varix as the last of House Judgment, so I guess maybe it's still there.
Yeah, one man fight.
Yeah.
One man house.
So we'll say Light, Salvation, Judgment, and Dusk is still kind of around. Not everyone picked a side. Some are just on their own trying to, survive.
Oh, and house merchandising.
And house merchandising, yes. House brand deal.
Shit. Wasn't ready for that one. I like it. All right. Well, shoot. Shout outs. Do we have any tonight?
So no direct shout outs tonight. And say all, which, we took a week off. It's to be expected.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a lull, which is fine. We did have a couple of people reach out and, wishing us a good Thanksgiving holiday. I thank you very much for that. I hope you all had
absolutely
as good of a time off as we did. And
I played lots of board games and it was awesome.
Yes, that is a fine way to spend a holiday. But we're excited to be back and to most likely finish out our Eliksni series with the next episode. And see where the new season takes us. And
oh my god, I'm so excited.
Yeah, so just thank you again to everyone that is tunes in and listens to these as we put them out, and is kind enough to leave reviews and such, whether you leave a message with it or not. I think last I looked, we were sitting at 4.8 on Apple Podcasts with 50 reviews, which is great. Spotify, we were sitting at 4.9 with 111. It's just awesome.
I love it.
Thank you so much.
I freaking love it. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Well, there is one kind of surprising bit of news. Twitter still exists.
Yeah.
I don't know who the hell is working there, but
We'll see for how much longer, but yeah.
do we still want to direct people to our Twitter, or are we directing them to both?
It's a perfectly fine place. So yeah, if you want to reach out and leave a note or have a question or something like that, you can contact us for as long as it still exists over on Twitter at Myths and Stories, spelled with a Z, the same way the title of the show is, and we check that, as time allows, and try and respond. So.
And as long as it's still active.
And as long as it's still there, yeah.
I have no idea how it's still running. Like, it's automation is king, I guess. I don't know.
I am convinced that one day I'm going to try and log in. It's just going to be a 404 error, and I'll be like, well,
yep,
saw that coming.
There it went. Bye. All right. All right. Well, I guess I got to give a thank you. I'll thank Eramis. I mean, without Ermis, like we wouldn't have gone after Outbreak. I don't think. Outbreak's a fantastic little pulse rifle. Like the story behind Outbreak Perfected and the previous Outbreak Prime. Like, oh my God, you want to go look into a rabbit hole of questing? Go check out the original D1 Outbreak Prime quest. Like that was, oh my God. I never had a chance to do it. I never did it myself, but holy shit, that was a complicated one.
Yes.
So thanks, Ermis, for, I don't know, maybe not for like giving into darkness, but for wanting more for your people and bringing us Outbreak.
Yeah.
Well, not bringing it to, I mean, we stole it before she could steal it, so, whatever. Thanks, Trevor. There we go, Trevor. Trevor gets a thanks too for killing me mercilessly over and over and over again. All right. Well, anything else, Myth?
That's it.
All righty. Well, then from all of us lore nerds to all of you guardians out there, we'll see you next time.